Welcome everyone to the Mentoring37 video podcast brought to you by the International Mentoring Community. My name is Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Certification for IMC, or the International Mentoring Community. And co-hosting is Doug Lawrence, who is the Director of Education for IMC. And like every show, when we start up, one of the things we do is read our definition of mentoring. And Doug has the pleasure of doing that today.
Great, thank you, and welcome everyone to Mentoring37. Our definition is as follows. Mentoring is about a two-way trusted arrangement in which the mentor and mentee can form a deeper and richer collaborative alliance, resulting in both learning and growing personally and professionally. And a couple things that jump out for me with the definition is the trusted arrangement piece. So without that trust, you actually have no relationship whatsoever. So trust is very, very important for us to look at. The other part is the aspect of both the mentor and the mentee growing personally and professionally. And why that stands out for me is the aspect of the personal growth. I think we're starting to now see, I know a lot of the literature in that I read is now seeing mention of personal and professional growth. So I think those are two things that stand out for us.
Great. Well, thank you. So one of the other things that we like to do at the very beginning is just share the format of what Mentoring37 is about. So the easiest way to describe it is it's 3 sections and 7 points per section or segments. So the first segment is about an action outcome linked to the profile associated with the certificate of competence mentor. So what we do is we dig into and take a look at this action outcome that is relevant to getting your certificate of competence mentor. The second segment is about a question from the community. Now, we may go and dig one out or someone sends it to us. Today is a show that has Doug going out and looking for something, and he found it, and he's bringing that question back for our consideration. And the third segment is updates from the International Mentoring Community with a bit of a slight twist, because what we're doing is we're constantly out there looking for what people are sharing. And sometimes they bring up issues. So we thought we would just grab a hold of a few of those and share those with you today as sort of a precursor for us to explore them deeper in Mentoring37 video podcasts that will be coming to you in the future. But also what's important here is to understand that Mentoring37 is linked to the International Mentoring Community. So it comes from a place of co-creation. Well, Doug and I are on here, we get that, but we would be inviting you to get involved as well. Is if you have time and you want to jump on, and we start at 10 a.m. Mountain on a Tuesday, it's the first and third Tuesday, then please join us. And maybe you've got a question you want to get in, or you've got a point that you'd like to raise, or you want to raise your hand and say, hey, can I give you my perspective on the topic? Wonderful. That's what we're looking for. So that provides a bit of a segue then into segment number 1. And what we're going to do is take a look at the action outcomes for today's show. And to be able to understand that, there are 68 active action outcomes, or statements that start with an action verb and it has an outcome attached to it, that are linked to guiding people who want to serve as mentors to understand what are the actions and outcomes associated with moving from being a mentor to a great mentor, but to an extraordinary mentor. That's what we're looking to create with the International Mentoring Community. And so Doug and I decided we're going to wrap 3 of those 68 together today. And those 3 are discuss the importance of fairness, respect, and trust in the mentoring arrangement. So each one of these would be separate, but what we did is we decided that we would run the three of them together because they are very helpful for the mentor to understand about the mentoring arrangement. That links to the relationship, but these, what are called ethical values, are what the mentor brings into the arrangement, and then through conversation encourages the mentee to bring them into their life and into the arrangement and into the collaborative conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a look at what this ethical values would be as compared to something like ethical neutral values. Now, in the IMC, what we do is we work with 7 core ethical values. Those are the values that we see that are shared when we are in community, when we're in our collaborative conversations. It's not to say that there aren't more than that, because there are people who offer up models where there might be less or more, but we're working with these 7. And to highlight those, I would just say to you is that there is this notion of trust, respect, fairness, caring, community, accountability, and hospitality. Those are the 7 of which we're looking at the 3 today. Now, in comparison to ethically neutral values, there are values that people would put on the table. I value this and I want you to know about it. And one of the values might be wealth. Another one might be adventure. And we get that, and that's of value and would probably come out in the mentoring arrangement. But when you look at it from the outside and from the whole, the ethically neutral ones aren't necessarily high on everyone's list, whereas if you talk about fairness, respect, and trust, woo, they're up there. People would go, yeah, I agree with that. Well, wealth and adventure are not as high on my value list at this point in time. So we get that, and that's why there's ethical values and ethically neutral values. And other things that the ethics link to are laws, because a lot of ethics lead into the world of the laws that we use in our political system, in our courts. And you might hear words like guiding principles. Another way that we look at them are this notion of inspired standards and wise practices. We bring them out in that way as well. So with that introduction, let's dive into and unpack these 3 ethical values. Now, the first one I'm going to look at is fairness. And this one is always the one that I thought sort of, if you use the ring the bell, is if it's happening, I'm ringing the bell because I'm find myself in a place that's not been a fair exchange. I've come to understand that it isn't always about that. It's actually about one of the other 2, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But the fairness is really about the impartiality, is that when you approach things, you're doing it without favoritism, or you're doing it without any kind of discrimination. Is that you're entering in, and let's use the mentoring arrangement as our base example here. So when you enter into it, there's no favoritism, there is no discrimination, impartiality is there, you're going to work with whatever it is that presents itself, and you deal with it in a fair way. Now, a word that tends to get added here is justice. And we might hear, well, what's the just approach here? What from a justice point of view and a fairness perspective, what would be appropriate in our conversation at this point in time? So you might hear phrasing like that, and it could come from the mentee, or you could hear it as a mentor saying it to yourself at this point in time. And really what it is about treating people equally. And in today's world, that becomes really important in any kind of arrangement relationship, is treating people equally. I came to understand this notion of the fairness from my own time working overseas. And I work with an organization called the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross. And it was, to be fair in my dealings with whoever I was working with, is that I couldn't have the appearance of taking one side or the other. I had to work equally no matter what happened. So if something was happening on one side of the conflict and it shut down operations, then we have to close the operations down on the other side. That's how far we had to go with this impartiality, this fairness of approach. And that made it quite interesting. And there was a couple of times where I was scratching my head, do I or should I? And then I realized, no, it's important to stay with this ethical value. Another example for me would be the rewards program. If we're talking about a mentoring in the workplace program, is that there must be, the criteria must be equal to all people to get involved. You can't favor a certain group unless the reward is for like the sales department or it is for the shop floor. That's the criteria that gets set. You know where it's attached to. So that becomes an important element of it. Now, I know that fairness has popped itself out a couple of times in Doug's life. Now, I'm just wondering, Doug, is there a quick little story or an example that you may want to pull out from fairness at this point in time?
Certainly, I guess for me, what sort of stands out is the aspect of treating people equally.
Yeah.
That's the most important. And I know we always tell the story of everyone is unique and all that sort of stuff, but you still need to treat people equally.
Yes. And the fairness one, and I think what we're hinting at here, links to the next one, respect. So that's what I meant earlier about, I thought it was fairness. And I'm going, oh, hang on a minute, there's a respect aspect here in terms of how people might share things with me or ask of things of me. My role as a manager and how I was being treated, was I being treated fairly and was I treating people fairly? And then to start to pop up into this world of respect. And I went, oh, hang on a minute, there's something more here. And when I think of respect, I think about this notion of a deep regard for someone's abilities and competence, all right, and their lived experience and their achievements, is that I respect people who have gone in there and have done what it is that they need to do. For those people who read about it, watch a video about it, and then come out and start saying, this is how it should be done, I can appreciate and I have regard for them putting their learning into action. Wonderful. And sometimes mentors will do that. They'll say, well, I have the lived experience in it because I watched the movie, so I get it. And I'm going, okay, I see where you might be going, but it's really about the deep regard for that lived experience. And we all have lived experience. It's how do you bring out that which is applicable to the arrangement at the time. Now, the other part to this respect, which is something, again, that I learned from my travels, was the deep regard, respect for customs and rights of other people in their country, those visiting. That's a little bit where hospitality links in that I had mentioned earlier, and people's traditions. But there's another part to this that's really interesting, and it's a regard or respect for people's feelings. And we can pass by that because, I'm not sure that I want to talk about the feelings part of it, and I'm going to zip by that one when, no, it might be better to just stay and just listen in, because one of the best ways to exhibit respect, and I think Doug would agree with me on this, and I just said it already, is listening, right? Listening to what someone is actually sharing, what they're speaking about, and going, okay, and having the courtesy and good manners to be present in that exchange. That's respect. And for a mentor to do anything less weakens the arrangement and weakens the relationship. Now, this whole listening in and being attentive to what's going on, there is a little caveat that I'd ask, and then I'm going to get Doug to share a story here. That caveat is, so long as someone's not doing harm to themselves or to others, you've got to respect that if that is happening, you may have to deal with it. You can't let that slide by. Right? So if you know that that's going to take place, then you would have to maybe get into this world of breaking some confidentiality to get that issue dealt with. So I just bring that to the surface as well. Doug, thoughts about or a story about respect from your end?
Yes, from the respect aspect, and it's something that with some of the mentoring I do within organizations, one of the things that we sometimes have to deal with is respecting, let me rephrase that, not respecting the person, but respecting the position. And so to work with people to be able to get them to work their way through that so that they know that you may not respect the person in the position, but you need to, because of the hierarchy of the organization, you need to respect the position. And if you're able to do that and figure out how to be able to navigate through that, your life is going to be a whole lot easier within the organization.
And that's why the ethical values that we're talking about here are ways that you share connections, and respect has to go both ways. Fairness has to go both ways. Just like the third one that we're going to talk about, trust has to go both ways, right? And I could jokingly say, well, can I fall into Doug's arms? And can Doug fall into my arms? You know, those trust falls. Not that I'm saying that we would ever do it, okay? But it's that imagery. Okay, I trust. Here I come, Doug. And Doug, come on. You can fall into me. There's that trust story that we're building up. But the trust that we're really talking about is not so much the activity of the fall into. It's really about the honesty and reliability of the connection that we have. That I can trust that in this case, Doug, and Doug can trust me. I can trust my mentee. The mentee can trust me, and you with the people that you interact with. Is that there is this reliability, this honesty in the approach, in the conversation. And most important, that you keep your promises. Promise keeping. The commitment to promise keeping is like one of the baseline underpinnings of this whole thing called ethical values, trust. And to let that slip by, it poses a problem. Now, I'm going to share this one is because I keep encountering this one all the time. There are people who want to break the rules before they know the rules and trust the rules. They want to jump. Well, no, we're going to do it this way. No, hang on a minute. You got to understand, why was the rule put there in the first place? So get to know it, right? Trust that it worked, and then find out if it's not really working, why is it working? And then let's break that rule to figure out and get a new rule so people know what it's about. So when you're in the mentoring arrangement, there are elements of know it, trust it, and then if you've got to break it and repackage it somehow, great, do so, right? Just like we would be asking the mentee, no, just know it, trust it, and maybe you may need to break that that conversation up a little bit, and the mentor's doing the same thing. When you get to that kind of level, ooh, that collaborative conversation is so beautiful, isn't it, Doug? It's just so beautiful. Any thoughts about that?
Well, one of the things that certainly from a trust perspective is in it, it can be something as simple as showing up for a scheduled meeting with your apprentice or your mentee, and not doing that breaches that trust. And from that point onwards, there you have a long road ahead of you to be able to rebuild that.
Yeah, and that links into the respect, that links into the fairness. These three things are sort of like chasing themselves. And if you actually, when we talk about the other ones, these 7 elements are chasing themselves all the time. And to really understand the ethical values and how to bring them into the arrangement is really one of the solid points that we want to bring to the foreground. So with that, that's the presentation. And so what we're going to do is move into segment number 2. And number 2 is really a question that is being asked on a place like Quora or in the community, emails sent to us, comments on the court coming from the courses. So Doug has found one, or he went out and found one, someone gave one to him. So he's going to share that. So Doug, what's happening today for the question segment?
So this is a question that was sent to me through the Quora website. And basically the question goes as follows. How can you tell if a business coach / mentor is good? And are there red flags to look out for? And I get asked this actually quite a bit. Where do I find mentors, and how do I know if they're good or not? And so the big thing here is that you need to be able to define your expectations up front. What do you actually hope to get from the relationship? And one of the things that I always do with people that I'm working with is I always ask the question, what was the value that we got from the time we spent together today? A mentoring relationship, and this is really important, a mentoring relationship is all about value. What value can the participants bring to that particular relationship? Now, what we need to do is be able to break down this question and look at it from the before and the after. And by after, I mean I'm already in the mentoring relationship. So the part before, what we want to be able to do is to make sure that there's some chemistry there between the mentor and the mentee. And if there is no chemistry, then it's probably not a good fit and you need to look for somebody else as a mentor. What I find that I like to be able to do is I'll have my initial meeting with somebody and I'll suggest to them that they go home and sleep on what we talked about before they actually commit to the longer term relationship. And then once we're satisfied that that's the path we want to take, then that's the road we take. But once you're in the relationship and you're starting to have those conversations with the mentor, watch the body language. The body language will tell you whether or not they're committed, to the relationship and whether or not there's actually chemistry there. And be mindful of your own body language because you could be sending some very negative messages and you may have no idea that you're doing that. Make sure that the mentor is present, that they don't appear to be someplace else. And we all know it's very easy to kind of zone out and be, especially if you're meeting in a coffee place or something, you're people watching and you're not paying any attention to, the person that you're working with. Excuse me. So what I typically like to be able to do is maintain that eye contact. Certainly not to the extent that I'm, constantly staring, but I make sure that I do it at the right time. And do they hold you accountable? So does that mentor actually hold you accountable? And because this is a two-way relationship, that accountability goes both ways. And so you need to be able to deal with that. And heaven forbid that you should ever have a meeting with a mentor and they say, you should know how to deal with this, so just go and deal with it. My time is too valuable for the little things like this. If that's ever said to you, run the other way and run fast, because this is not a good mentor and this is not a good relationship to be in. And you need the chemistry. You need trusted relationships, and you need to be able to communicate effectively. If any of those are missing, it's not going to work, and you need to look elsewhere. And that's it.
Now, you bring up, if people are listening to what you're just sharing, you use the word trust, you use the word accountability, you spoke about the respect and fairness aspect of this. All of what we're talking about today, there's a theme that's going through here about ethical values and how important they are to what it is that the mentor and the mentee share. And so let's not lose that as we move forward. So thanks for that, Doug. Appreciate that. And I believe that sort of sets us up for our segment number 3, and that's sharing some insights about what's going on in the international mentoring community. And today we're going to identify a few issues that are popping up in the literature, in the articles, the research, the things that we're diving around in looking for, especially as it links to mentoring in the workplace programs, the adult mentoring, and to some degree, mentoring that we were going to be encouraging for parents and grandparents in terms of working and interacting and supporting and guiding the children and grandchildren. That's sort of one of the areas that is near and dear to both of our hearts. So we're looking at that area as well. So just to let you know, folks, the mentoring community is up. There is the certificates you can get into and get involved with. We will be posting a couple of new sales pages about the courses where you can go read a little bit more if it entices you in, knowing that if you do the self-assessment and you complete that, you can reach out and have a conversation for 15 minutes with Doug, who can help you understand what's the best way to move forward into the international mentoring community. So it's a great way to get involved and to learn and to get involved with our collaborative conversation. So that's wonderful. Another thing that we're doing is we're going to be doing some beta testing around the Mentoring Circle Facilitator program. We're going to reach out to some people that we know, but if you're hearing this and you want to get involved with it, then jump on board. It's about a 5-week commitment, 5 hours online in a group, and probably about 5 hours offline, where you're just doing a little bit of your own reading, writing, and just sending some comments back to us. So just to let you know that that's going on. But herein is something that we're poking around in, and we're unpacking some of this, and we're learning and trying to get some deeper and richer understanding around some of the issues that are popping up for people. And I'm just going to start off with a couple here. And again, we're not going to dive into it here. We're just going to bring it to your awareness, because maybe you have some comments that you want to share, or you've got some resources. Hey, guys, I'd like to get you to this, and so that you can use it in the courses, and we'd so appreciate that. So, welcome for that. A couple of the issues that are popping up is, especially for new mentors, is where do you start the conversation? Is where to get started is another issue that keeps popping up, which is what's in and what's out of the conversation, which is sometimes called boundaries. What is the boundary that we're working with here? Because if it's a mentoring in the workplace program, or it's a youth mentoring program, or it's a parents and grandparents, what's the boundary that we're working with here? Because that will help to give you a sense of where you start. And so we're going to dive into that a little bit more in subsequent shows, because the mentoring arrangement leans into or led by the mentor. And therefore, the mentor has to get things started up, because the mentee may not always know how to make it work. So the mentor has got to get it going, then the mentee, and then eventually you'll get to a point that you are starting, there we go, and we're doing what it is that we're meant to do. And so that's an important element. The other one, and it links to today's theme, which is about ethical values. What is the ethical value? What's ethically neutral? What's one of the reasons we did the show, and we found that that was a topic that's out there, and we're going, okay, this makes sense. We're meant to chat about that in this one. And again, it's about clarifying the boundaries. What's in and what's out of the what's going on. What's going on over there that you want to chat about?
Well, the big thing for me that I noticed in a couple of the articles I went through this morning, and I think it was Cornerstone on Demand was one of the websites I was in, was they were talking specifically about leadership and how to go about developing potential leaders, and that there was this huge leadership talent shortage. And I'm just going to grab the article here where it was actually a study that was done on LinkedIn that it showed that 61% of companies do not offer any leadership training. And that was one point. So that's a huge issue for certainly from where I'm looking at things. The other that I found quite interesting, because if you want to get people's attention, talk money, is the aspect the study found that the average company forfeits more than $1 million annually in untapped potential and loses up to 50% of productivity because of subpar leadership practices.
Wow.
It was startling for me to go through. I knew some of the numbers were way up there because I've been following this particular thing quite a bit, because here's to sort of tie this together to our conversation is the aspect that we have leadership development programs in some organizations, but what they fail to do is they provide the academic knowledge that people need, what they need to know academically, to be a leader, but we don't provide them the practical application. So we throw them in the deep end of the pool and say, swim, but we're not there to support them. We're not there to throw a life raft or a preserver and say at the end of the day, what went well, what didn't go well, what are we going to do differently next time?
Right. But that brings up another piece that you found as well when you were digging around in there, and that was that whole area of confidentiality. Do you want to share a little bit about that part?
Yes, the aspect of confidentiality, and for me, this has always been something that I'm cognizant of, and that's because I am working with multiple clients at any given time. And so, some have bigger issues than others, but you still have to be cognizant of that. And what was said in the article was they used the word quality mentors. I'm going to substitute that and say extraordinary mentors can compartmentalize each client's situation, problems, and possible solutions. So the difference between, your mentor that's trying to do good and trying to help people as best they can versus someone that is fully engaged, we'll call it, is their practice, for lack of a better choice of words, their mentoring practice and their multiple clients and all of that. They need to be able to figure out how to compartmentalize that. But the other part that's not talked about in this article is how do you deal with, if you're dealing with some pretty heavy stuff, how do you personally deal with that as well?
Well, I think that this confidentiality piece and the leadership aspect, I think we need to, as we say, unpack it and dig into this a little bit deeper. So I think we'll acknowledge that for one of the shows that's coming up, and to be able to take a look at it. So those are some of the issues that we're hearing. We've been picking up a few others, but those are ones that we just wanted to highlight today. And as we look at sort of leaving the show, because we attempt to do our best to keep it under 37 minutes, which is what Mentoring 37 is about as well, just a couple of things that are worth noting. There is some technology insights that will be coming along in the shows to follow. Our next video podcast is going to be on June the 4th at 10 a.m. Mountain. And what's the great thing as well is that on that June the 4th at 12 Mountain, we're going to be running a virtual mentoring circle. So we're actually going to move what Doug does in Regina with a group of people on a Saturday morning, we're actually going to open up that possibility for everyone online. So that should be fun. So we'll be inviting you to certainly get involved and come in and see and feel that one. And again, so that's at 12 Mountain. So the show's at 10 a.m. Mountain. The circle is at 12 Mountain. And just as we head to close, June 4th is the next one. And what we're going to be taking a look at is the wonderful topic of manage documentation, which could be for some people, oh, that sounds a little dry, but I think you'll find it to be fascinating when we finish having a chat about it. So, Doug, you want to take us out?
I sure can do that. So everyone, embrace the gift of mentoring and remember that every minute is a mentoring minute, and have a great day.